The sky was clear that afternoon, sharp blue and endless, the kind of canvas that made you forget how fast life could nosedive. I was mending a broken section of barbed wire along the southern pasture when the low, guttural sputtering of a struggling engine broke the stillness. I looked up just in time to see a silver Cessna 210 stutter through the sky, dipping erratically. "Come on, hold it," I muttered, dropping my pliers, but the plane was losing altitude fast. It banked hard, clipped the edge of the tree line, and came down with a violent crunch in my lower field, kicking up a storm of dust and debris. My boots were already pounding dirt before the dust settled. The wreck was bad, but not fatal. The nose was crumpled, the wings mangled, but no fire. A miracle. The pilot, a young woman, late 20s maybe, was slumped over the yoke, but breathing. She coughed, blood trailing from her temple, and looked up at me through a shattered window. "You okay?" I called out. She nodded weakly. "Engine failed. Tried to make the grass. Sorry, I didn't mean to crash here." "You did good. You're alive. That's all that matters." I pried open the door, helped her out, and laid her gently in the shade of a mesquite tree. By then, I'd already called the local fire station and the FAA emergency line. I knew the protocol. This wasn't the first time a plane had flirted with disaster over open Texas. Ranchland paramedics were on scene within 10 minutes, followed by a county sheriff. I briefed them, stayed out of their way, and answered what I could by the FAA rep, a quiet man with a notepad and reflective vest. Started cataloging the damage. But the real storm didn't arrive on flashing lights. It came in a white BMW X5 with vanity plates and rage in the driver's seat. Karen Monroe, president of the Fairview Lakeside HOA, queen of bylaws, self-appointed guardian of community standards, and unfortunately, my neighbor's sort of her HOA development bordered the edge of my 1,200-acre ranch. Her voice, however, carried like she owned all of Texas. "What in God's name is happening?" she shrieked as she marched past emergency tape. "Plane crash," I said flatly. Not in the mood. Karen gawked at the wreckage like it was a personal affront. "This is a violation of airspace. Do you have any idea what kind of disruption this causes for the community? For property values, lady. Someone nearly died. Maybe try some humanity." "I am being human," she snapped, "by protecting everyone else from your negligence." I almost laughed, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. "I'm calling the police," she said, whipping out her phone with a dramatic flourish. "They're already here," I said, nodding toward the sheriff. But Karen wasn't interested in reason. She walked right up to a firefighter and began demanding answers, orders, paperwork. She pointed fingers, took photos, and loudly declared that she would be filing an official HOA incident report. When the FAA agent asked her to step back, she accused him of harassment. Then she pointed at me. "This is his land. He allowed this. Probably part of some backdoor operation. You people need to check the hangars." The sheriff chuckled. "Ma'am, we've known Jack Taylor since before you had a lawn here. There's no hangar, no runway. Just a woman who got real lucky crashing into a man's field instead of a subdivision." Karen turned red, puffed up, then stormed back to her car, but not before hissing at me. "You'll be hearing from the HOA legal team." As her tires spun gravel, I shook my head and muttered, "Can't crash a plane around here without it becoming a scandal." The paramedics loaded the pilot, Melanie, I later learned, into the ambulance, and I watched as they drove off, grateful she was alive. But as the dust settled over the field, something else took root and unease. Karen wasn't just angry, she was offended. And offended people with power, even fake HOA power, were dangerous. I thought the worst had passed with the crash, but in hindsight, the plane falling from the sky wasn't the real disaster. Karen was, and she was just getting started. 2 days after the crash, I found an envelope duct taped to my mailbox. No postage, just a gold HOA seal and 6 pages of barely legible legalese. The subject line was typed in bold: "Notice of violation, unauthorized aircraft incident, and threat to community safety." I read it twice before laughing out loud. Karen had filed a formal complaint against me for a plane crash I didn't cause, didn't expect, and didn't benefit from. Her accusation, that I'd knowingly created an aviation hazard by maintaining open land conducive to illegal landings. According to her, I was operating an unlicensed rural airstrip and had failed to coordinate with the Community Association for aerial clearance. You'd think I had missiles stashed in the hay barn. The next morning, a code enforcement truck pulled up my drive. The officer was polite, apologetic even, but said they had to respond to multiple complaints. "Something about you harboring aircraft," he said, glancing awkwardly at the empty pasture. "Do you see an airport here?" I asked, arms folded. He smirked. "No runway, no problem." He left 10 minutes later without filing anything. But the message was clear. Karen was weaponizing bureaucracy. She started sending drones over my property, claiming visual documentation of potential violations. She even set up a neighborhood watch-style Facebook group called Safe Skies over Fairview, and she posted blurry images of my barn with captions like "unregistered hangar" and "FAA blind or bot." Then came the town council meeting. Karen stood before the microphone draped in a red blazer like she was testifying before Congress. "This is not just about a crash. she said, her voice rising to theatrical levels. It's about the deliberate negligence of a property owner whose land choices endanger the safety and serenity of our entire community. I was there, seated in the back, arms crossed, watching her spin. Melanie barely survived. She continued, "What if she'd hit one of our homes, our children? These fields are too close to residential areas. The rancher Mr. Jack Taylor must be held accountable." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few heads nodded. Others rolled their eyes. I rose calmly when it was my turn. "I didn't crash the plane," I said. "I didn't invite it, but I helped save a life. That land's been in my family since before Fairview had sidewalks. I don't answer to HOA rules because I've never signed a single page of them, and Karen knows it." Karen opened her mouth to interject, but the mayor held up a hand. "This isn't an HOA forum," he reminded her. Afterward, 3 neighbors came up to shake my hand. 5 more whispered that Karen was off the rails, but a few of the HOA loyalists followed me outside, snapping photos of my truck plates and murmuring about community safety protocols. I started to feel surrounded not by people, but by paperwork. Every day a new nuisance. Noise complaints about non-existent aircraft. Letters demanding I mow the back 40 within HOA visual guidelines, a petition to restrict future aerial activity on agricultural properties. It was absurd and relentless. Then came the cherry on top. Karen filed an official report with the FAA in it. She accused me of maintaining unauthorized aviation facilities, coordinating clandestine air traffic, and obstructing federal investigators. The report triggered an FAA site visit, this time more serious. 2 agents showed up, flashed badges, and began a formal inspection. One of them, Argent Klein, asked direct questions. "Have you had any prior aircraft land here before the crash?" "No." "Any maintenance facilities? Landing strips?" "Just pasture and cattle. Closest I got to a tower is the old windmill." They spent the afternoon measuring distances, taking photos, and verifying coordinates. By evening they had their answer. No violation, no facility, no problem. But then Klein asked something interesting. "Did you know someone filed a report under penalty of perjury stating you were running an illegal airfield?" My jaw clenched. "Karen Munro," he gave a small smile. "Can't say, but false reports to a federal agency carry steep consequences." That's when I knew the wind had shifted. Karen had gone from irritating to dangerous. Her obsession had crossed a line into criminal recklessness, and she'd tangled with a system far bigger than HOA guidelines. I watched the agents drive off, their taillights fading down the gravel road, and I felt it deep in my bones. This wasn't over. Karen thought she was flying high. She had no idea how hard the fall could be. 3 days after the FAA's visit, I received a call from someone who didn't need to introduce herself. "Jack," said the familiar voice, "it's Lila. I got your message." And I saw the FAA report. Lila Porter wasn't just my cousin, she was also a federal aviation attorney working in DC, sharp as a scalpel. As a sniper. If anyone knew how to bring down a paper tyrant like Karen, it was her. "She filed a federal report?" Lila asked, "claiming you were operating an unregistered airfield." "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temples. "Sent it directly to the FAA, used her HOA president title, to, signed and dated." There was a beat of silence. Then Lila's voice dropped. "That's a felony." I stopped pacing. "You serious?" "Absolutely. Making knowingly false statements to a federal agency, especially regarding aviation, is a violation. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 1001, it carries fines and potential jail time." Now it was my turn to be quiet. "I'll draft the paperwork," Lila continued. "Let me handle this, Jack. She thinks she's untouchable behind HOA bylaws. Let's see how she does under federal scrutiny." I grinned for the first time in days. Let's clip her wings. The next morning, Lila filed a formal complaint with the FAA's legal division, attaching every record: the crash incident, the drone harassment, Karen's signed false report, and statements from the FAA investigators themselves. Within hours, it was escalated to enforcement review. Meanwhile, Karen's campaign of pettiness rolled on. She started sending weekly compliance reminders to my mailbox, even though I wasn't part of her HOA. She reported my tractor as excessively loud machinery and accused my ranch dog, Buck, of menacing neighborhood children. The thing is, there were no children anywhere near the property. It was pasture on 3 sides, barbed wire, and cattle. But facts had never been Karen's strong suit. Still, the pressure worked. My ranch hands were on edge. Local suppliers asked if I was under investigation. And Melanie the pilot called me in tears. She sent someone to my apartment. She said, some HOA guy in a tie. He asked questions about the crash. Accused me of reckless flying. Said if I didn't retract my FAA statement, there'd be legal consequences. That was it. Karen had stepped way over the line. With Lila's help, I arranged a public FAA safety event on my ranch. We called it a Rural Emergency Response Training Day. Real FAA officials were invited. So were reporters, and Yeskrin was notified by certified mail. The day of the event, my southern pasture became a small hub of tents, display boards, emergency landing demos, and FAA pilots giving talks. The community turnout was strong. Fire departments, medics, even a few kids wide-eyed at the mock cockpit. Karen showed up halfway through, heels clicking over the dirt like she thought she was stepping onto a courtroom floor. She marched straight to the central tent, pointed at the FAA banners, and shouted, "This is an illegal gathering. These operations are in violation of HOA regulations." The crowd quieted. A tall man in a Navy FAA windbreaker stepped forward. "Calmly, ma'am. This is a federally approved educational event. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here." Karen blinked, flustered. "This is private land. You can't just—" "It's his private land," the agent said, pointing to me, "and your actions are under review. You'll be receiving a letter from our enforcement division shortly." You could hear the air leave the crowd. Karen sputtered, spun on her heels, and stormed off toward her BMW. And just like that, the tide turned. That evening, she was served a notice, $50,000 federal fine for knowingly submitting a false aviation report and interfering with a federal investigation. The next morning it was all over the local paper. The headline read, "HOA president fined after filing false FAA complaint." Neighbors started peeling her campaign flyers off their mailboxes. A recall petition gained momentum. For the first time in weeks, the air over my ranch felt light again. Karen had tried to bring me down with paperwork and paranoia, but in her crusade she'd ignored the one rule that had kept our skies safe since the first barnstormers flew over wheat fields. You don't lie to the FAA. She thought she could control the air. But now, gravity was doing its work, and I had a front row seat to the fall. Karen didn't take the fall quietly. 2 days after the FAA fine hit, she attempted damage control, flooding the Fairview Lakeside Community Board with long-winded posts about government overreach and an orchestrated smear campaign by a hostile landowner. She held an emergency HOA meeting closed to non-members, of course, and promised to pursue legal appeals to protect Fairview's airspace integrity. But it was too late. The headlines had gone viral. National HOA watchdog groups picked up the story. She became a punchline on aviation forums. One meme read, "You thought turbulence was bad. Meet Karen Control Tower." I kept my head down, didn't gloat, didn't post, but I did notice the shift. People who used to glare at me in town now nodded. Some even offered quiet apologies. And then came the final snap. The HOA board voted to remove Karen as president. A unanimous vote. No public ceremony. Just a letter taped to her front door and a nameplate scraped off the HOA clubhouse. I found out from the mailman. She went ballistic. He told me, screaming in the driveway, said she was going to sue the board, the FAA, and the US government all in one go. Sounds ambitious, I muttered. She sold the house 2 weeks later. Rumor had it she took a loss, couldn't find a buyer fast enough with her name still tangled in Google search results. The day she left, her SUV rumbled past my property. I was out by the gate fixing a busted latch. She slowed just long enough for our eyes to meet through the windshield. No words. Just a long bitter stared out, then she was gone, swallowed by the dust. The piece that followed was slow but steady. FAA agents sent a thank you letter for hosting the emergency event. Melanie recovered from her injuries and returned to flying. She even mailed me a signed photo with a note. "Thanks for being the best runway I never meant to land on." But I didn't forget how close it had come. How icily a lie wrapped in HOA stationery nearly became a noose around my name. So I made a decision. I cleared out the crash site and turned the field into a memorial garden. I planted wildflowers, set a stone bench near the impact site, and added a bronze plaque in honor of safe landings and second chances. I didn't invite a crowd, just a few friends, local first responders, and Melanie, who showed up with a quiet smile and a grateful hug. She said, looking around at the open land, "This place could be a designated emergency landing. Those zone rural areas like this are perfect. Unclouded skies, flat terrain." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what the FAA told me." With some guidance from Leela, we submitted paperwork to register a portion of the ranch as an official emergency landing site. It was approved within a month. The same field Karen had called a danger to the community was now a certified life-saving asset. I put up a small weather station, installed a light beacon, and left the rest untouched. No hangar, no strip, just open grass and open skies. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it so the next Melanie wouldn't have to pray there was room to fall. Sometimes I walked the memorial path in the quiet hour before dusk. The wind carries a whisper through the tall grass. Cattle graze in the distance. And somewhere beyond the tree line, the land stretches wide and wild, uncontrolled, unboxed. UNTAMED. Exactly how it's meant to be. Karen had tried to shrink the world into rules and fences, convinced that control meant safety. But she never understood the difference between power and stewardship. She built her kingdom out of bylaws. I built mine out of earth, and when the sky cracked open, hers collapsed under the weight of her ego. Mine held steady just like it always has, because this isn't just land, it's legacy, and no HOA in the world can change that.